What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Sports Medicine Broadcast, Depression and Athletic Training with Christi Keeler. See, the thing is, depression was never really real to me. It was just one of those things that people weren't strong enough to deal with it. So they just made an excuse. However, Sarah had a baby. She had some postpartum depression. And then I started to understand, hey, maybe this is real, right? So I was arrogant enough to think that it wasn't real, that it was something that people just kind of made up. But then I also spoke with Christi, and she's had a really tough battle with depression after having a baby, and then several different life changes. And so Christi's joining us today to share, as an athletic trainer, as a mom, as a daughter, whatever it is, share her story with depression, so that if you feel like you're going through it, or you have somebody that is going through it, that you know that you are not alone. So, Christi, I'm glad to have you back. I think you were on one of the first five episodes we ever did. And like you said, it's changed a lot since then. So welcome back.
Thank you so much.
All right. I'm your host, Jeremy Jackson. This is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/depression. Again, sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/depression. So, Christi, why don't you share with us your story of becoming an AT, and then we'll get to the depression.
Okay. First, let me start off by saying my plan was to never have kids, and I was pretty sure I was not going to get married. So I thought athletic training was the perfect profession for me. I love to be on the sidelines. I love the injuries, the blood, the everything. So going into it, I did it in high school. I knew it was something I had a passion for, and I loved that every day was different. So I decided to go to college, get my degree. I got my master's and bachelor's in athletic training, and then started working and worked until I met my husband. Let me back up and say that my heart started to change as I got older, of course. And when I met my husband, then I could really see us having a family together and starting a new life together. So at this point, I'm still working. We got married, and then literally less than 3 months later, we got pregnant. And I didn't really know how to handle it. It was fine. I was excited. But I knew there was an expectation for me to possibly stay home, which would be the first time I would ever not work. So that was a challenge. So when it came time, I really struggled with the idea of staying home and not working. But once we had our first son, I could not even imagine leaving him. So I stayed home and I really enjoyed it, and we had some great time, and I just loved to spend that time with him. I stopped working, so that was a challenge when I'm used to working, 50, 60, sometimes more hours a week. But again, you're giving this child 24/7 care that definitely keeps you busy. And then we got pregnant with our second son, and things were going good. My husband started his own business, so he was traveling a lot, but things were still going good. And then we had our second son, and things were still going okay. I was still learning, getting the ropes down. And about 3 months after he was born, I started to just kind of struggle with keeping up with the kids. And then slowly it progressed. And my husband was still traveling at this time, just coming home on the weekends. We still had, a good relationship, a good life and everything. Everybody was happy, but I was just slowly becoming less functional. I started crying for no reason. I was just tired all the time. I would get angry over the simplest things, and almost to like a raging point. The kids would do something and I would just have this intense anger, which I had never dealt with anger until I had kids. So that was a learning curve too, but it was not characteristic of myself. And so I was talking to a friend, and at this point, Levi was about 10 months old, talking with a friend, and she was talking about she had a baby about 2 months after me. And she's like, I think I have postpartum depression. And she's talking through all her symptoms. And I'm like, you know what? I think I'm right there with you. Thank you for helping me realize it, because Craig and I had been arguing, and I'd had all these just vast emotions, up and down and everywhere, and I could not figure out what was going on. And so that conversation with her really opened my eyes to, wow, how did we all miss this? This is what's going on. So I started to get help. called my doctor. I started going to counseling. At this point, I was still nursing and I wasn't really open to medication. At this point, I started to have suicidal thoughts. They weren't every day. They would come and go. It was something that I felt like I could overcome if I would just get a little bit more sleep or get a break or things like that. So um, I tried to do natural ways to treat depression, like taking a lot of omegas under a doctor's care, doing essential oils, exercising, sleeping, eating right, all the things that you're supposed to do, anyways. And I just kept slowly going farther into deeper depression. Nothing was helping. The cycles of the suicidal thoughts were becoming shorter and shorter. So they were becoming something that I was dealing with weekly, to something I was dealing with daily, to something I was literally dealing with every moment of the day. And that was the darkest time and the hardest thing to deal with. And it was never something that I wanted to hurt the kids or anything like that. It was more of like, why can't I handle this? I feel like I'm a failure as a wife, as a mom. Um, so it was a really struggle for me. And it became so, dark and you're fighting these thoughts. And it was something that I had never dealt with before. Not many people that I know had dealt with it, so that was even harder. Because you want somebody to talk to, right? You want somebody to be like, "I'm not crazy. I'm not losing my mind. Why can't I get past this? I don't want this for myself. I don't wanna hurt myself. I don't wanna take my life. I wanna be there for my kids." But you just have this sense of hopelessness that there's just no other way. That's the only way that all this can be done, that it's just so painful. I've never felt that much pain, and I've had 2 kids. And so just to tap out for a second from the pain, it's so tempting to wanna go down that dark road. But eventually I was hospitalized because I didn't feel safe by myself. I wasn't functioning. I couldn't take care of the kids. I couldn't even trust myself just to go take a shower. Like, it was just not a safe environment. And my therapist had been encouraging me to do that. My psychiatrist had been encouraging me to go to the hospital, and so had my husband. So I had a great support team. And I forgot to mention during this time, my parents came down, his parents came down, their moms were living with us at different times. My sister would come down to kind of help me because I was not functional. I was on a lot of different medications about right before I went to the hospital. So after I tried all that natural stuff and it didn't work for me, I started trying medications, and it took a year to find a medication that would actually take away the suicidal thoughts. And during that time, I went into the hospital for 5 days, and they were trying to find the right medication. And you go through it's group therapy and um, finding out what your triggers are. And it was really helpful, but it was more helpful just to get a break and kind of walk away from the house and to put myself into a safe environment to talk with other people that were dealing with the same thing. Um, and then I had a seizure. So that was a lot of those medicines can cause that. So I had one side effect is seizures with a lot of antidepressants, and I was on such a high dose that I had a seizure, and then I couldn't drive for 3 months. So our moms came and stayed with us. So it was a long process, to say the least, to get through all that.
Yeah, that is a crazy story. And I've told this story multiple times, and I try to tell every new dad or everyone that is expecting that take off as much time as possible when the baby is first born, because I was literally washing the dishes 15 feet from Sarah, and she was nursing our firstborn, and she was mad at me for not sitting at her feet while she was nursing. Right? There's just something not right. Right? So you got all those hormones and emotions, and like you said, you don't realize it's some sort of like postpartum depression. And Sarah was able to kind of get past that without any sort of counseling or hospitalization or medicines, that kind of stuff. But if we had realized earlier, we could have talked to somebody earlier and possibly shortened the time that she was having those troubles. But there's so much more in that story. So in the beginning, you mentioned that you didn't really plan to get married, didn't really plan to have kids. So just to start with, you're battling internally your emotions. Like, I really love this job. I really love doing athletic training, but I really love my husband and I really want to have kids with him. And I know that what's best for our kids is for me to be able to stay home, but I really love this job and I don't really want to stay home. So just to start with, you were already going through a lot of turmoil. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you worked through that process?
It was a challenge, and honestly, it took that whole time that it was just Wyatt, our oldest son, and I to kind of, build community with other moms that were home. So just to, like, go have play dates, go work out together. I led a Bible study at our house, and that helped to just kind of build that community. But it wasn't really until we had our second son that I accepted it, the childcare role, and I really enjoyed it. And then everything started to go downhill. But it was a challenge. It took some time to adjust. And in that time, before we had our second son, we had moved twice. So, and he was 2 years old when we had our second son. So we had moved quite a bit. My husband had changed jobs, and then he went to owning his own business and traveling all the time. So we had a lot of life changes that happened in a short amount of time, which can also set you up for mental health, anxiety, or depression.
And then, like you said, there's a lot of changes. So, and you said you also had never, you didn't really know anybody that was dealing with depression or anxiety and those kind of things. Um, and so how did you feel like as someone, maybe Craig mentioned it for the first time, hey, maybe you have postpartum depression. So talk a little bit more about the first time someone mentioned it, and then the process to where you were meeting with your friend, talking with your friend, and she said, here's what I have going on. And then it kind of clicked for you.
Well, I knew, like I said, that something was wrong. Craig and I started arguing, and that's really kind of out of character for us. I mean, everybody has their tiffs and stuff, but we were getting into legitimate arguments, and I was acting in ways that were out of character for me. I knew that the problem was me, but I couldn't figure out why and what was going on. And all I was doing was just trying my best, but it still wasn't good enough. And I just kept failing and failing until I talked to my friend. And, I just thought it was the struggles of motherhood and trying to figure out how to raise your kids and what your marriage would look like and how to be a wife and a mom and a friend, and I'm just kind of figuring it out. And then in that conversation with my friend who was also dealing with it, kind of opened my eyes, and then I felt relief. Like, okay, there is something going on. Now let's fix it. I'm very much into like an action. Let's get it taken care of. Don't want to deal with this any longer kind of mode. So, the first thing I did was call my doctor. Unfortunately, one thing with postpartum depression, if you're at a year or later, the treatment process is a lot slower. If you go to call your doctor, for example, and saying you're 3 or 6 months pregnant or postpartum, and you're dealing with it, they'll get you into a lot of doctors. They have connections. But if you're 1 year past that, it's kind of like you're washed away at the wayside. You have to search the route yourself. So that was a challenge to begin with, finding a therapist, finding a psychiatrist. Um, I had went through a couple psychiatrists. I remember the first psychiatrist I met told me I needed to stop nursing, stop working, and just give up kind of like on this whole motherhood thing, on staying home. And I was like, she is crazy. And she was trying to give me medicine. And I was like, no way. But looking back, that's probably what I should have done. They're medical professionals for a reason. But at that point, like I said, I wasn't ready for medicine. I wasn't ready for that big of a change. Um, but slow steps, I got to that point. We found a medicine that works, and I got to the point where I knew I had to take something because everything that I was doing was not helping. So don't feel like you're a failure if you have to take medicine. It's made for a reason. It's there to help you. And there's plenty of other people. There's so many conversations I've had where people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm taking this," or "I'm dealing with anxiety," or "I'm dealing with anxiety and depression," or just depression, and I'm on this. And it's just not talked about. A lot of people are taking it as well.
All right. So as an athletic trainer, we fix things. We help people deal with this. You have probably went through a psychology of injury course when you were doing uh, your your college stuff, and so how did any of your medical background play into your understanding or your denial of the depression?
Well, there's the grieving process, so that's always helpful, right? And it's pretty textbook to walk through that and recognize that. Um, but honestly, I felt like this was kind of like uncharted territory for me, because you throw in the hormones and everything. I felt like I could deal with depression, um, but when it came to the at this point when I was going through it, I did not have a good relationship with my son. I wanted to get away from him. There was no connection. I didn't have patience for him, and he was a crier at this point when he was a baby.
Mhm.
So that's where our family came in and really helped out. My husband helped out a lot. But I didn't really know, and I couldn't connect with many people that were in the same boat that had gone through the same thing. Um, so it was kind of like uncharted territory to me, and I felt alone a lot. It wasn't until I had gone through it and started talking to other people, the other moms were talking with their stories, and then that started to really get me connected. Social media is another way to get connected, through whatever source, but Facebook was one. There's postpartum groups, there's postpartum organizations that focus on resources for you. So that was a great way to get me educated and connected with other moms and with the right therapists.
Hmm. So, what do you think was the most beneficial um, indicator, most beneficial step that you took in dealing with the depression?
That's a good question. It was a process. There was a lot. I think getting help and telling people, kind of you have to go through that process where you accept it and not be afraid of it, not be embarrassed of it. And once I got past that stigma, I was able to talk to other people about it and able to even tell them like, "Hey, I'm having these thoughts of hurting myself or taking my life." And it took me a while to not be embarrassed to tell somebody that because I felt like a crazy person.
Mhm.
But in doing that, a lot of people couldn't really relate to it, but they could be there for me. They could support me. They could help me with the kids. They could pray for me. And that was really encouraging.
When I took the AT's care course, that was actually part of the training. Is you have to role play, and so if you and I are partnered up, then I would be pretending like I'm going to harm myself, and I have to, or if you're the I don't know, say victim, but the patient, then I would say, are you thinking about killing yourself? Like it's hard for a person to even ask that question, even in pretend. And so, like, for you to say that whenever you're, in a concussion mode where everything is foggy, nothing is clear,
Yeah.
I can only imagine how difficult it would be for you to be able to say, this is real. This is how I'm feeling, and especially to somebody that you love, like your husband, and you're afraid to hurt him, and what might happen there. So, um, what do you feel like the best thing that your husband did to help you move forward?
Let me start off by saying that my husband is amazing. I love him so much, and I literally would not be sitting here today without him and his support through this whole process. He stood by me. He loved me. He listened to me. He held me when I cried. He was my like backbone to get me through that. Along with my relationship with the Lord, those two things really kind of walked me through. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. But he was so encouraging. He would leave me notes and tell me how brave I was and how, next day is going to be better and this day is going to be good and focus on this and focus on that. And you're fighting so hard. I can see that. And you're a great mom. So affirmation is my love language. So he was affirming to me quite often and just like, we're going to get through this. It was never just my fight, it was our fight. And so we did it together.
All right. Now, what does the depression look like right now for you every day?
So I'm a lot more functional now. I've actually been working for about a year and a half. I'm just working part time, which has been great for me to transition from going home to back to work. And in that time, I've had to switch the medications to find the right one. So that can kind of be painful, and you have side effects, and you're tired or nauseous or whatever the case may be. So now that I've been on a solid medication for I'm on a couple medications, but a solid one for a year, and that took away most of the suicidal thoughts and just the grogginess and the cloudiness and the constant up and down of emotions. So now instead of it's, a great scale of up and down for emotions and everything, now it's just a smaller scale. So I might have a bad day, but I am nowhere where I was. I'm not having suicidal thoughts. I'm not raging at the kids. I'm not crying in the closet. It's just like I'm kind of having a blah day. So I'm functional
So
and
like
taking care of
basically
myself.
like a bad day before the depression. So it's
Right.
just kind of a normal.
Just a normal bad day. Yeah.
Okay. Um, and then, so do you have to take those medicines every day? And then like, what happens if you forget, if you miss a day?
Yeah, I do have to take them every day. I don't miss a day. Is
Just
that
don't.
I take them when I'm supposed to because I know what I felt like before and I don't want to feel like that. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I don't know how long I'll be on them. I'm sure at some point once I'm stabilized for a certain time, we'll start coming off of them. But yeah, I feel the closest I've felt to myself since before having Levi.
Gotcha. You said you've got lots of life changes going on. Actually, your husband is working in a different state, living with his family because he took a different job. You're in the process of trying to sell your house. You're managing the kids by yourself. So, how are you dealing with that? How are you preventing sliding back into the depression now that you're kind of put back in a very stressful situation?
That's a good question. So one thing that we did as soon as this situation was going to happen is that we called on our family again. So his mom was down, and then my parents are down, and my sister's coming. So we have that support. So I recognize my triggers, and that is one. I'm not good at asking for help, but now we set that up so I don't even have to. So we have the help there. I make sure I get enough sleep. That's a huge trigger for me. Taking my medicine, going to work is a good outlet for me, so it gets me out of the house. I get to engage with patients, and I really get some fulfillment from that. So going to work still helps me with that as well. So just kind of like going through my normal routine is really helpful for me, and having that support there to help me with the kids when they're out.
Right? If someone is kind of feeling that hopelessness, that foggy feeling, the just something's not right. I just can't figure out what it is. What would you say to them?
Um, you're not alone. I feel like that's the most important thing that I heard. You're not alone, and you are not what you're thinking. Like those thoughts are not you, they're depression. Um, Separating yourself from that, which I've learned to do through counseling, and a lot of my other moms that I've talked to have done that as well. It's so helpful to separate yourself from depression and anxiety, whichever you may deal with, and to know what is you and what is that disease, because it's a mental disease that you're dealing with. It might not be something that you would see like a knee injury or ankle injury, and it's easier to hide, but to definitely know your worth, have a support group, whatever that might look like, your parents, your family, your friends, medical professionals, just kind of having that whole wraparound support is the best way to get through it.
All right. So for someone dealing with depression, know that you're not alone, and talk to people who you trust, who you're close with, because you said that your family came down, they gathered around you, that your husband came around and just supported you. Um, from what I'm hearing, none of them said, "Christy, just get over it."
Right.
And so that's definitely one thing I would think now you would really want to avoid. You would say you're not alone, but you don't want to say just get over it. You're okay, fine, just shake it off because that's how you felt, right?
Yeah. I felt like I could just keep going, but I think people on the outside see more than you see. So they could look at me and they could spend time with me and know that I was not myself, that I wasn't acting like myself, I wasn't functioning like myself. And so it really took a lot of them to be that mirror for me to see that this is not you. Especially my husband. He did a great job of that.
Now, I would think that at this point you've kind of gone back and looked at like family history and seen if anybody has like those signs, symptoms, or a history of depression in your family. Have you done that?
Yeah, and in fact, there's a little bit, but nothing postpartum, so that was another nobody had ever dealt with, had gone that deep into depression. It was just kind of mild. Um, so that was a challenge.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be, my grandma was depressed and my mom's depressed and I'm depressed. It can be just kind of out of the blue
Yeah,
because you were fine
anybody.
after your first child. It was just the second one and
Mhm.
all the different life changes and whatever it is, the hormones just never balance out after that kid. And it really can just be without cause. So, all right. I mentioned again that I always encourage the dads to take off as much time because you said you guys had a great relationship. Sarah and I have a great relationship, but she was still mad at me for washing the dishes so that she wouldn't have to while she was nursing our child. And so, again, if you can establish that relationship, those loving, trusting relationships, I again, I don't deal with depression, and Sarah doesn't any longer deal with depression. So I don't have true firsthand experience, but I know that what I've learned from the AT's cares, from speaking with Christy, from talking with Sarah, and just experiencing different conversations. Again, know that you're not alone. So, Christy, if you were to speak to somebody about, um, well, you've already said that the support groups. One of the things you Let me see. One of the things you said was that you've spoken to lots of women's groups. That's what it was. This isn't the first time you're talking about your story, right? So you were able to just really share your story and how you've kind of walked through the process, and it seems like you've told that story often. How did that help you in dealing with it?
Um, I couldn't really tell it until I had gone through the darkest part. When I was in it, I'm like, "I don't get this. I don't understand this plan. I don't wanna hurt myself. Why can't this go away?" Like, "We've been through enough as a family, and come on." But it wasn't until I got better and that I've kind of felt this desire to let people know, like, on social media or people in my church life or my family and friends that you're not alone. I just felt like that was my biggest struggle, that I felt like I was alone, even though I still had that support. So I've talked to a lot of women. They've talked to me, women I've gone through postpartum since, and friends, mutual friends have been like, "Hey, can I give your number to this person? They're going through depression, or they're going through postpartum depression." I've talked to people on social media and like just encouraging them, like, "Hey, you're not alone. You can get through this. I've made it through it. It took me this long. It took a long time too. Like, it might not always be that 3 month find the right medicine, So it's encouraging to know. I know it was encouraging for me, to know that I wasn't alone and that it might not be the shortest road possible. Because a lot of people think at a year postpartum that it's not postpartum depression anymore, or that it's, something else that you're dealing with. And so it was pretty hard to get treatment. So the more I've kind of gone along, the more I'm seeing like a lot of women that are just aren't not they're not recognizing it, or they're not getting the treatment they need at that time. So a lot of women are taking a longer road as well too.
Right. So, like I said at the beginning, I was arrogant enough to think that depression wasn't real until I learned a little bit. Um, what would be your like final thoughts there, or parts of the story that we may not have covered in dealing with depression?
Um, don't be afraid to ask for help, even if you're not sure how bad your depression or anxiety is. Um, Anybody can get can go to counseling and grow from it. The best couple, the smartest person, the strongest person, you're not weak for going to counseling. You're not weak for asking for help. These are all things that you would do if you had sprained your ankle or hurt yourself physically. So this is something that needs to be treated, preferably right away, in order to prevent you going down a long, dark, painful road. Suicide is so prominent, um, and for a lot of reasons, it is increasing every day, the suicidal rates. So I just would encourage you to not even get near that road and to treat it as soon as possible.
Right. And then if someone is feeling, or if someone were to say to you, I'm having thoughts of suicide, what would you do right then?
It depends on their situation. So a lot of the people that I've talked to are wives. So I always ask them, "Have you told your husband?" Because that's usually the hardest thing to do, and it's also the most important thing to do. Your husband is with you all the time. He's watching you. He knows your patterns. For some reason, if he would catch some behavior that's not normal, then he would see that red flag and jump on it. Also, are you seeing a doctor? Do you want to go to the ER? You want to get medical attention right away, whatever it may be, whatever you feel the most comfortable with, and as soon as possible. Some people want to go to the ER right away and possibly go into the hospital, behavioral hospital. Some people want to wait for that person that they trust and they feel comfortable that they can wait a day or two to get in with their PCP or MD or whoever they feel comfortable with.
I know when we did the AT's care training, when I was speaking with the role playing athlete saying that they were going to kill themselves, they said that, you don't let them walk away. Like,
Right.
if they choose to, then you just say, okay, well, I'll go with you. Or you don't just leave them you say, okay, well, come see me tomorrow. Because if someone has admitted, I'm thinking about killing myself, then if they can verbalize it, then it's, something that they've been thinking about. And so, yeah, don't just say, oh, okay, well, I got to go. But, let them talk about it. Ask them some more questions. One of the things they said there is, have you made a plan? Because if they've made a plan, then it's probably going to happen.
Yeah.
And so you discuss those things, and maybe at that same time you're Facebook messaging their husband, or a friend, or something like that. You're talking to somebody else saying, hey, I'm gonna come over right now, or that kind of thing. But if someone is dealing with depression or having suicidal thoughts, don't leave them to themselves, right? They need somebody right then. And that's just what Christi said. She had so many people around her, but she was still trudging through those feelings, which became every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't have a whole lot more. I mean, you did an amazing job sharing your story. Is there any other thoughts that you have that we might not have covered?
I don't think so. It's been a challenge. We'll say the biggest challenge professionally has been not being in the training room again, the athletic training room again, and not being on the field with, all the athletes and everything that I enjoy. So, um, that's okay too. You might have to change your job a little bit. Mine's a lot more family friendly now. But we've realized along the way that I can only handle so much, and that's what I need to stay within. I don't need to be super mom or do things that I could do 5 or 10 years ago. So just recognize your boundaries, be comfortable with that, accept it, and be happy with it. And again, I just want to encourage therapy. I've been through years of therapy through this. And if I didn't have that ability to grow within myself and to separate depression and myself, I would be lost still. So just thankful for all the medical professionals that help us to get through situations like this.
All right, very good. Now, if you were going to point somebody to one resource, what do you think that would be?
That's a tough one because there's so many good ones. Therapy, I think, for sure. No, anybody can grow from talk therapy, counseling. Finding a good one though that you really trust can be a challenge. So it's okay to go through a couple therapists until you find one that you really trust and you feel like it's going to be a good fit.
All right. And, if you attend church regularly, a lot of churches will have some sort of Christian counseling service, or at least large churches do. And so you could speak with somebody there and say, hey, do you recommend somebody? And then that way it's somebody that'll kind of align with your beliefs, hopefully, and they're on a similar page. So,
That's
going,
where I felt mine.
yeah, going back to what you said at the beginning, you're not alone. And I'm here to help. There's somebody here to help. You're not alone. So if you're dealing with depression, know that you're not alone. Know that this is a real medical condition, and seeking help is highly recommended. So, Christi, I really appreciate you coming here, sharing your story, and I pray that as you guys transition, this stressful, that everything continues to go smoothly, and then that you guys enjoy your time there in Oklahoma. So,
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
mm-hmm. I have an email list, which is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/email list. If you'd like to join that there. And then you want to, Christy, somebody wants to reach out and get a hold of you. What's going to be the best way to do that?
They can email me, and it's my name. It's Christi, Christi Keeler, Keeler @gmail.com.
All right. So you can email Christi Keeler @gmail.com, and then she'll share her story with you. She can listen, going on from there, or maybe her resources, things that have worked for her. Again, you're not alone. So reach out, and Christy's offering her email there, so you can reach out to her as you've heard from her. I am Jeremy Jackson, host of the Sports Medicine Broadcast. Again, this one is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/depression. So for Christi Keeler, Jeremy Jackson, the Sports Medicine One Kids, that is a wrap.